All right.
Oh,
Hello. Welcome.
hi.
You're
Great
Michael,
to
and
be
the
here.
last name is Deklerk.
That's right. You
Deklerk.
got it.
Okay.
Most
I
people
don't
don't
think
get it on the
I've
first try, so
really. Okay. Yeah. I was like, it's not one that I've seen
bravo.
before, but if it's pronounced the way it's spelt, it's Deklerk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you told me you just finished a 10-day what?
10-day intensive for my graduate program in psychotherapy.
All right. And
Yeah.
why are you going into psychotherapy?
Yeah, it's a great place to jump off. Yeah, I mean it's a long story, so and long format to do that. But I mean for me, I think my whole life I've always been someone who loves people and loves talking to people.
Hmm.
Um, but that on its own is not enough, I think, to get someone into this career that's, extremely demanding
Hmm.
and challenging and for me I grew up in the Bay Area, California, in an extremely beautiful area of the world. Um, very, very privileged childhood as well. Upper middle class. But I came from a really challenging familial dynamic. There was, just emotional, physical abuse in the home. Parents got divorced, and that really took a toll on me. It was when I was 13 at like a really critical time of development. And I kind of went from this very, extroverted, like bubbly, uh, enjoyable kid to very introverted, um, you know, guy. And I kind of like went through my teenage years with this secret of what had happened to me and my family that I like kept closer to my chest than just about anything. And it felt like this buffer between me and kind of the rest of my peers. Um, and in college, I was my sophomore year, I was a orientation leader for my school, and it was the first time that I'd kind of really been in a leadership position. Um, and I I think all of the thoughts that I had accumulated about myself from my from my dad primarily, um, just like flooded my system like all at once. Just thoughts of not being enough, not being, a good enough leader, charismatic enough, funny enough, like whatever, brave enough. And I had a panic attack my third day, and I was still kind of delusional enough to think that I didn't need help at that time. And my mom kind of, found a therapist, kind of told me to go, and that truly changed my life. Like I still see him to this day. And he, I think like that kind of story arc is quite typical with people in my field. Um, but more than just, helping me cure my depression or whatever, he really showed me that therapy is can be a spiritual practice and a creative practice. And that is something that I've tried to embody, throughout my degree. I'm actually, I just had an interview for a internship site today.
Hmm.
And what I'm trying to bring into that experience is this sense that um, healing and developing a greater connection with ourselves and with others is really this um to me this like turning towards some cosmic spiritual force guide, I mean whatever you want to call it. I'm comfortable using the religious language, a lot of people aren't. But that sense of like redemption, surrender, like divine connection, um, is it's available to everybody, and it's really the only career that I've been able to find that I think allows me to bring the fullness of myself to work every day, and um, yeah. There's probably a lot more that I can say, but I'm curious what
No,
that brings
that's
up
a
for
good
you.
jumping off point. I I tell people because I know a lot of people who have something of it the same kind of origination point where it was like bad
Hmm.
childhood and that affects them even to this day. Some people it affects negatively, and some people like you're like, hey, I actually can like work through this, become better, and learn from the past. Um,
Right.
and I have another friend as well who is also a therapist. He's trying to do family counseling, and so
Hmm.
I think it might actually be tomorrow that he's doing this like 3 hour long test or something. So it was
Mm.
kind of interesting to run into you and hear that you're taking all that stuff, as I actually know somebody that I see pretty regularly heading down that same path. But you said with your path, um, that you think of it as a, or you were told by the therapist and you took that on as, recovery is like a spiritual and a creative endeavor. Is that how you put it? I believe.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
can you explain what the spiritual aspect for you was, and then the creative aspect, and maybe how those combined later on?
Yeah. 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 That's great. Maybe a little bit background on my therapist as I've kind of come to know
Yeah, that'd
him.
be good.
Yeah. So his grandfather, his name is Sam Schumacher, and he was a member of the Oxford Society group, and they were a uh, kind of a group of American evangelicals in the early 20th century who were interested in kind of bringing church teachings to the masses in areas outside of the church. And so they actually were the founding members of AA.
Hmm.
And so like at the core of kind of the religious undertones of AA is this group. And Carl Jung actually, of course, he was like working with this one guy who knew Sam and the other members of AA, or the Oxford group at the time. And basically, his work with him and Jung's idea that at the root of addiction is this like spiritual impulse towards wholeness, that kind of inspired the first three steps of AA. And so that's the lineage that my therapist comes from. And so early on in my work with him, like there was like unpacking childhood, family systems, uh you know diagram drawing, and working through being a child of a narcissist, and a lot of psychoeducation around that. But then at a certain point it became a lot more about kind of in this Buddhist way of like noticing the attachments we have to our thoughts and to our beliefs, and creating some space between those. Like one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Viktor Frankl, who says cognition is the space between reaction and response, which was very very much the kind of work that we were doing, is kind of slowly incrementally like creating a little bit more space between what I immediately will default to thinking about myself or in response to a situation. And through, mindfulness, first acceptance. So he's like trained in acceptance and commitment therapy. So it's like a lot about like, you know, kind of departing from CBT in the sense that, we're not trying to like replace a bad thought with like a better thought. But we're, working with what we have, um, learning to understand where it comes from, being kind of ourself in context, and then, um, he doesn't like explicitly, use like God language, but he's like very well read and comfortable with, spiritual language and like spiritual teachings and practices. And so, yeah, a lot of the work I think is like creating the space and an opening for a a new understanding or like a curious inquiry. And so I think that's where it kind of like leads into the creative part is, um there's like a lot of our work is around like kind of like narrative deconstruction and then like narrative reconstruction or narrative construction. So kind of on the other side of like unpacking, say, childhood trauma and like kind of, understanding where our beliefs come from is like, well, where do you want to go? Like what do what do you want to believe as true, or, you know, where do you want the next chapter of your story to go? And then, okay, let's see what obstacles, let's see what fears, let's see what anxieties come up, you know, when you verbalize that, and then kind of moving through that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of like narrative kind of therapy as well. Um, but I think, and we can talk about this more. I think, I've I've kind of also taken the experiences that I've had with him outside of the therapy room, and like I've birthed a practice of poetry. I think in large part due to, my experience with him. And I also think, dialogue and conversation is a can be a creative act. Um, and so those are kind of the two domains that I experience creativity like most regularly.
Yeah, so maybe a way of putting it is that the act of like the act of maintaining a friendship is something that could be viewed as an art form,
Yeah,
since like there's a narrative through line
absolutely.
between what connects you and the other people that you associate with. And one of the ways that you share that, one of ways that that through line can appear through, is shared either experiences which you look back on and you talk about and you'll laugh at like it's a comedy, or uh, both cry over if it was a sad moment, or even just watching a movie or something. That's a narrative thing, and by both of you consuming the same movie, you now have an additional narrative, and you know how this person reacts to, uh let's just say like Project Hail Mary, whenever
I
when
just watched that
it,
with my girlfriend.
I
Yeah.
was like, finally a good sci-fi movie in the theaters again. I was so
Yeah, no,
excited.
seriously.
But
Seriously.
whenever Rocky, you know, saves Grace, and you just see all the pain that Rocky's in, and you just like, oh man,
Mm.
this affects me like a lot. And then you're with your girlfriend. I imagine that she's also over there like me, probably crying the whole time that's going
Yeah,
on. And
yeah.
it's like this is like a bonding moment, and the narrative of that story is now kind of like a part of our relationship, the way that it affected both of us and
Yes.
how we can both see how
Yep.
it affected each other allows us to connect on a deeper level. And like you said, I've read a couple of your poems. Memento II is my personal favorite of what I've read. I like the overall tone of joy in your poetry. So I guess that's the next thing I want to ask is it seems to be that for
Hmm.
you, the way that you express the art that came from your therapy is through poetry and what seems to be a drive towards like more cheerful poetry, if I am correct in that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's interesting you have that perspective because that's what I want people to feel, and that's the experience that I have I would say at the end of most, kind of like the lingering aftertaste of like a poem that I write is that joy. Um, but it's interesting because if I set out to try and write a happy poem, it usually will end in a really sad one.
Yep.
And that's actually usually where I start is like is some I don't want to say dark place, but it's usually what gets me to the page is the challenging thing that I'm wrestling through. And I think the beautiful thing about poetry is it's so like the writing process itself is so transformative that by the end what I've started with is, it's if it hasn't changed, I would be skeptical of my own writing. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would be skeptical of even putting it out. But so kind of when you reached out to me and I was just reflecting on my own poetry because that's how Aaron and I know each other, and I've been wanting to put together a collection of poems and publish it for a little while, and so I kind of just roughly looked at which poems would make the cut, and I kind of was just thinking of a title, and I was kind of just mining the poems for some image or something, and I had written the I had mentioned the tempest eye in one of my poems, and I was like, oh, I like that, and like I was kind of just playing with it, and the something that I have realized about my poetry is that I'm really interested in the kind of coincidence of opposites idea, like
Yes.
finding the harmony between oppositional energies. And so kind of the rough title that I'm working with right now is The Calm in the Tempest Eye. Um, and so I think a lot of my life has been, and I guess a lot of like the narrative or the story of my life has been like finding the beauty in suffering, to put it kind of simply. Um, 'Cause that has been, I mean, at times, like literally kind of a matter of survival. It's felt like, and so um, I, I think just that ethos, that spirit of hope, um, of of joy, but not not like cheap joy. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like joy that's like kind of been hard won. Um, and I think for a while I was in I had this belief that I think a lot of young people who are trying to hack it at creativity have, that you like need to be freaking drinking all the time and like just in deep despair to create good good art. And so anything that like smelled of positivity was like cringe, and like no one wants to read that. And I got to a point where I was like, not only not only is this what I would want to put out in the world, and like if I was like at an open mic, like what I would want, like what the message that I would want to give, like this also just feels the most truthful. Like the arc from like, kind of the pain or the hardship to the joy at the end,
Mm-hmm.
feels like the fulfillment of like, you know, kind of the yeah, the arc of being alive, or my personal arc.
Yeah, it makes me think of you've probably already heard, and I'm gonna uh, hopefully loop it around properly
Yeah.
and end it with a question because I think you'd agree with where I've come to with this. So it's kind of like it's almost like joy is double joy after the pain of sorrow that you have to go through to rediscover what joy is. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
this idea, especially because Tolkien's the hot topic, so I've heard a lot of the people say it, is that he had the idea of the eucatastrophe, is what he called it, where it's like the point at like the lowest part of the story where the greatest thing occurs that causes all of the
Yeah.
good things to happen afterwards. And he uses the crucifixion of Jesus Christ as the example of what the eucatastrophe is. It's like you have in the beginning, everything is perfect, everything collapses to the point where the one who created everything then dies in place of all of the collapsed and all of the pain, and then rises again and is like, not only are we going back to the point of perfection now that we've gone through this down period of pain, the joy to come will be even greater.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe
Mm-hmm.
like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
kind of makes me think for stories, I totally understand it's like, oh, everything's dark and depressing. And I've gotten to a point probably like a year ago, I think is where I really settled on it. Is I think any story that ends in a depressing manner, like with no hope, is actually a lie. Because I,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm okay with things being sad, but for some reason, I bounce off stories where the bad guy wins and there is no hope and there is no joy really hard. And I couldn't really pin down for a long time why I bounced off them so hard because they could still be well shot, they could still be well acted. But at the end of it, I'd always be left with this bad taste in my mouth. And I think that bad taste was feeling like I was lied to because I was
Yeah.
like, well, the problem is there is hope and there is joy, even if there's immense suffering along the way. At the very end of all things, especially like I'm a Christian, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
my belief is that literally at the end of all things is where joy is finally fulfilled. So no matter what occurs in the middle section, it could be the most tragic thing imaginable. And again, as a Christian, that's what I believe is the most tragic thing imaginable is what happens in the middle section. But that the very end of the story is joy. And I'm going to use Star Wars Episode 5 as an example of
Love
this.
it.
Yes,
Mhm.
it's like we're all nerds here. I think that when, aside from probably being the best with the dialogue and with the pacing, it's just, it's hitting, the series is hitting its stride in that one. Aside from that, I think one of the reasons why it's the most beloved is the fact that while technically the characters are at the lowest that they've ever been from like a starting point or an ending point in that film specifically, it has more hope than episode 4, which is called The New Hope,
Mhm.
even though it's technically with them on the back foot compared to the ending of episode 4, where on the front foot. And I was like, I think that's one of the reasons, and I don't know how many other people view it that way, but it's like the reason it is so satisfying isn't because it finishes the story, nor because it ends in total joy, but because at the bottom of the well, they're already like, well, we're all going to climb out of here and we're going to take the victory home in the next one. Which is why I've never been opposed to shows that end early or movies that never got the proper sequel if they end with the idea that like, no, next one we're winning. Because I'm like, well, that's kind of like a promise that I get to fill the gap in of the joy of the idea. Like, okay, it looks bad from this point of view, but I know the ending is joy.
Mhm.
So I don't know if what your thoughts are on the idea
Yeah.
like a story that ends poorly is lying, or maybe how that's
Yeah.
affected your
No,
writing.
I love that. I think it's so true. And I And I think what's interesting too is like the the truth that you're pointing to of the ultimate like redemption and positive ending. It's like that's you kind of you have to look a little bit beneath the surface to actually find that. And so I think like a lot of people, I think I mean Project Hail Mary is such a great example of that because so many sci-fi movies today are just like just
Yeah.
one dystopian tale after another, and like people like there's a part of us that want to indulge in that because we we turn on the news, that's what we see, we feel like that's like all there is to reality. Um, but like if you actually notice what it feels like at the end of that movie or whatever, at the end of that type of story, like I'm just thinking of like I didn't read any Orwell in college or in high school, but I read I don't know if you've read The Giver. We had
Yes,
to
I
read.
have. I
Yeah.
It's right here actually.
Oh yeah.
I have my bookshelf right here, but this is The Giver.
Oh sweet. Yeah, I
I
don't know
love
what
this
you're.
film. I
Yeah.
love this
Yeah, no,
book.
I
The film was okay.
yeah, the film was okay. But like, that book is like, man, it's I just remember like having such a nihilistic view on reality after I read, and it leaves it leaves a sour taste in your mouth, as brilliant
Really?
as it was. I actually kind of
I wasn't
forget how
left
it
with a
ends,
sour
but
taste. I want to go over the ending real quick because you said it leaves a sour
yeah,
taste, and
yeah.
I actually, the more I thought about the ending, because I remember when I read the ending, I also thought this is bizarre, and then uh, later on, I was kind of like, actually, I do think that is a pretty proper ending, but it takes time to sit before you really notice it because it does. It gets really depressing and kind of boring towards
Hmm.
the end because it's just I think is it Jonas? I can't remember what his name is
Yeah,
now.
Jonas. Yeah, yeah.
With I think he calls the baby Gabe. I can't remember what the baby's name was that he gave it. And he's running away with the baby and he's just feeding the baby happy thoughts, which is kind of depressing him. And it's just kind of like a week or more of him just hiding at the end until he finally finds a sled, and it's just like a regular sled, and it's like, well, you just came from this futuristic sounding society, and he takes the sled down, and he just I think I might slightly be getting the movie's ending mixed in. I'm actually just gonna pull it out and read the last
Yeah, because
chapter.
I don't think I remember I just remember, didn't he try and escape multiple times and he couldn't? It was kind of like a lost
Yeah,
situation where like he just kept getting, found and brought back, and but I think I
he manages
forget
to escape at the end.
how it
So I'm gonna read
actually
the last two
it ends.
paragraphs because it's like 6 lines. Downward, downward, faster and faster. Suddenly he was aware with certainty and joy that below, ahead, they were waiting for him, and that they were waiting, too, for the baby. For the first time, he heard something that he knew to be music. He heard people singing. Behind him, across vast distances of space and time from the place he had left, he thought he heard music, too, but perhaps it was only an echo. And so
Mm,
at the point that he's going down the hill, and Gabriel's the baby's name. I was right. Um,
mhm.
he's he is a little bit delirious, so you don't quite know what's actually going on. But like it says right here, as he's going down the hill, he's approaching the sound of singing, like music, like happy music, and behind him, he's leaving behind. Uh, and it implies earlier that he's leaving to try and help free his civilization from the clutches of him being the one who holds all the memories of him being the giver.
Mm,
So it's
mhm.
like there's an echo of what sounds to be singing from behind him, but he's heading towards the joy of the singing in front of him. So it has this weird, because of the really odd lull in pacing that's really depressing right there, to where you get to the end and you're like, is this real or is this not real? and you have to
Right.
kind of like make that judgment, like did he make it with the baby or not. And in the rest of the stories you find out
Mm-hmm.
that he did. But
Mm-hmm.
again, it's elusively joyful, even though it appears depressing, because it could be like, oh well, did he or didn't he make it? But
Right. But
he does
he's
ultimately make
yeah.
it. He's pursuing
Yeah.
he's pursuing the end goal, which is joy. And so later on, I
Yeah.
was like, I think that actually fits very well, because he's leaving. There's not really a low point in the story. It's just him spiraling upwards. The low point is just the journey away to the end point, where
Mm-hmm.
he is entrusting himself and the baby to the sled that's leading him to a house that appears to be caroling. You know,
Yeah. And I think I mean, what's beautiful, and I should really read the book again.
I should too.
But I think what's beautiful about that is like even if no sequels were made, I think I would have felt satisfied at that end because at least there's a movement towards a
Mm-hmm.
new horizon or a new possibility, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not everyone's been slaughtered or, it's like last man, like a lot of the like science fiction movies are like, last man on earth kind of thing where
Mm-hmm.
there's just like no hope of, you know, anything new being created. And there's the fact that there's still like some positive movement being preserved in, in his heart, some hope for the future. Um, but also it doesn't like do the like cheap, happily ever after move either, where it's like, everything's just like everything's clear. There's still some it's a journey. It's still like, he's still kind of like um, I don't know, like Jesus in the desert or like the Israelites for 40 days. Like there's a movement towards the promised land, but like it's like a yeah, it's like a I think I heard once that Tolkien almost called what was it, either The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, like um there but not yet or something like that. Uh I'm
Like an
failing on my
original title
um
that he didn't go with instead of.
yeah, I think there was something referenced in the Hobbit about like already there or already there not yet. I'm fumbling now, but
It's okay.
um
Let me see if I can find it while you're
anyways,
thinking.
yeah. Um but yeah, just like that idea of like being being like at one with spirit or at one with God, like within one's heart, but like not yet found, like, not yet there, not yet in heaven, is kind of like the human condition. But um
In the
yeah,
pursuit of, I guess, is the way of putting it.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it's called The Hobbit or There and Back Again. I don't see anything
there
that
and back
says that
again.
There and Back
Yeah,
Again. Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think I had something else in my head, but yeah, I mean, just kind of back to your original point about kind of feeling like a story that doesn't end with hope as, being sort of kind of being lied to or being cheated. That's, just thinking of like hope as a you know theological virtue and like a story that is absent that it's almost like there's like a part of the author that has been like shunted to the side or like or kind of denied or suppressed. I don't know how much Cormac McCarthy you've read, but like
None so
I
far.
read, yeah. I think if you have the stance that you have, I don't think you'd enjoy him very much.
Maybe
I
not, but
think that
I still read opposing
yeah,
viewpoints anyways.
yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I read The Road recently, and it's it just yeah, and apparently Blood Meridian is like even more
Okay,
dark
I've
and
heard of both of those stories before. So not
Yeah, yeah,
I know of them, not read them though.
yeah,
It's
totally. But it's in a lot of ways it's I mean it's a beautifully written books, and they're like their reason they're so well known. But it ends like it just extremely bleakly, and it's also very wryly written, like kind of just very matter of fact. Um, and yeah, I was just left being like, I don't know, kind of like it's not a book that like sends me out into the world with, like just energy or vitality or, oh wow, I can, I feel like after I came out of Project Hail Mary, it was like the world had more color or something,
yeah,
I
I
don't know if
like
you
that
had
way of
that
putting it.
experience.
I did.
Yeah.
It was so nice whenever I saw that movie to have a movie where it was the world is ending and it wasn't because humanity sucks. It was like a third party element, and
Yeah.
the
Good
reason
point.
that everything succeeded was by everyone working together.
Yep.
Um, and I don't know if you noticed, but there's a lot of stuff that happens in the background that is actually really adds character to the people. Another thing I really liked about that movie, was how, and this is something that Andy Weir in one of his interviews I watched said he also enjoyed that he didn't do in the book, is a lot of the characters, especially the German lady. I think she's German, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
he said he actually wrote her just as a cold character who was just trying to get things done. And he said in the movie they made her more likable. They actually gave her more warmth. So they made her very practical, but still someone who is doing good things. And I also like the agent that's given
Hmm.
to Grace, and he seems to be completely cold and dead, and then he cracks a joke suddenly, and you realize like, oh, he's also a human. And whenever they buy the Skittles and he dumps like all the
Yeah.
Skittles in, if you notice in the background, all of the other characters in the background are eating Skittles. So they bought all of those
Oh,
Skittles
yeah.
and then they gave them to everybody. So everybody, like, while
Yes,
they're
yes,
doing
I
their
remember
jobs eating
that. Uh-huh.
Skittles. And I was like, that's so cool. And so you just continue to have this forward progression where all these characters that you would think are going to be really stale and unimportant are actually just as human as the main characters the whole time, which I think doubles down on the entire thesis of the film, which is like, we have to work together, and we need each other, and we can do great things. And I was like, by
Yeah.
having those tiny details of these characters in the background interacting with stuff the primary characters are doing that doesn't seem important, just adds a whole extra layer to the depth of what it's trying to get across. And I think just makes everything feel more important overall in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really yeah, that's a very astute observation. And I'm just thinking back now to like the scene where he kind of makes like a memorial for the two other
Yeah.
astronauts who passed away. Like he's like, it was even bizarre because like he clearly he comes out of the coma and he remembers a lot about his life, but he doesn't remember having relationships with these, kind of the core part of his life that like got him there, but he still nonetheless like wants to pay tribute to them. And I found that really, really beautiful. And anyways, don't have to make the whole podcast about this movie, but
I
I
mean, I'm
think
fine with it. It's something that affects
yeah,
both of
yeah,
us, and it connects to with how we are, perceiving the world and trying to push things forward too. It was like
totally,
somebody else that,
totally.
well, like we said earlier in the podcast, it's a story that causes the relationship to grow deeper,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I'm
It's a
fine
it's
with
a
referencing it
touchstone.
as much as we
It's a
need to,
touchstone.
especially because it's
Yeah.
a point that a lot of other people have seen it too. So a lot of other people can relate to it
Hmm.
by listening.
Yeah.
So talk about it as much
Yeah.
as you
And
want.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm also kind of just curious, like, to get to know you a little bit more
Hmm.
through, like I can, and I think that's a, something about like talking or dialoguing about stories. that is kind of overlooked or undervalued is like the degree to which you can learn about a person just by the way they talk about their favorite stories,
Yes.
and what they pick up and what they notice about them. Like that's something really, um, yeah, really profound about the person. But yeah, I think another thing that I've been reflecting on with that movie that um, made me really emotional is like the the kind of hero that didn't want to be a hero or didn't ask to be a hero.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm so bad at recalling quotes, but I feel like there's a quote hovering in my head that Plato said about like leaders and like most leader, or I think he said like the best leaders don't want to lead or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he like Grace like right before he gets injected, he's like begging her to like
Let
not
him
send
go.
him up because he's like I'm not brave, I can't do this, like I'm not the guy you want. And even when he wakes up, he's like, what am I doing here? Like I'm so ill-equipped for this. Um, and and then even when he like communicates with Rocky about like the word brave, like
Yeah,
you
he
know,
never says
uh,
brave though. He just
yeah,
types it
right,
down, and I was like, well, what a cool detail for that.
yeah, totally, totally. And yeah, it's like the sense that you can't even say it about like if you are really brave and you are really courageous, like you also have the humility to not like it's almost like you can't call yourself that. It's like through the eyes of other people, you are that you are that way. And um I that yeah, that really that storyline really got to me, like, where he like Rocky does the brave thing by allowing him, the fuel to get back to Earth, and sacrifices himself, and then he turns back and does the same thing. Um, and then the story ends with you don't actually know if he. Well, I haven't read the book, so I don't know if it's shared in the book, but like you don't know if he returns to Earth. Like
It's not
he,
stated in the movie, and I can't remember what he said about the book because I haven't read the book either.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
So
it's
it's
because in the movie they reference that they're trying to create another aircraft or another
to send
spaceship for
him
him.
home.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think the implication is that he's here until he decides he's ready to go home because he says he's like, oh, you know what, I kind of like it out here. In
yeah,
reference to
yeah,
Rocky saying that they're trying to find a way to make a spaceship for him. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, did you have more to say on that or
No, that
no?
was kind of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I also want to touch on that point of Grace being brave, and I think the quote, I think C.S. Lewis stole it um, for Caspian in the book where he's introduced, where Aslan tells him, he asks Caspian, he's like, "Hey, um, do you want to be king?" And Caspian, who's just essentially liberated himself from a kingdom, uh, is kind of like, "No, sir, I don't think I'm worthy of being a king." And then Aslan says, "Okay, but you are now king because of your humility in this." It's like the fact that you weren't
Hmm.
vying for power, you just were trying to help everybody escape the word treachery is coming to my mind, but or oppression that they were currently in, and that your goal was just helping people is the thing that kind of gives you the power and the authority to lead whenever everybody was following your lead anyways. So I don't know the exact quote, but I think roughly speaking, that's a good reference point if you
Yeah,
agree that's
yeah.
the point you were trying to hit. Um, but for Project Hail Mary, when you have, I love how they reveal his backstory in tandem with the brave thing he is now doing. And I like to think
Mm.
that he's actually regaining his memory at the same speed that we're getting the flashbacks. That's my personal take on it, because I feel like it means more to view it that way. And so, yeah, he completely outright refuses the call, to the point where he is thrown against his will into the mission and becomes the sole survivor. And I think the line where the lady just says, she says, "No one will know this happened. Everyone will think you're a hero." Like, she acknowledges
Hmm.
before he has a chance to like run away that she knows he's a coward and ill-equipped and would just let everybody die because he's so cowardly. And for Rocky to be like, because Rocky thinks he can go home, because Rocky can go home, so he's like, no, what's a suicide mission? Your life is too valuable to not have a way back. And that's
Yeah.
why Rocky's like, well, what's the word for a person who's willing to die for others? Because Grace could
Mm.
have at any point ended his own life, but he instead continued on with the journey anyways, because he is a coward, and they were given explicitly items that allowed them to commit suicide. And Grace will not allow himself to think of himself as brave, because he remembers that he is just a coward who was forced on this mission, right? Like, he's not the traditional hero at all, but he types on the computer brave, waiting for Rocky to just make a noise, because every time he comes up with the word, he types it in the computer, then Rocky makes the noise, and it translates it onto that. And then Rocky's like, well, you are this thing, but there's still hope. Since I'm here and I love you, I can get you back home. It'll just take me a little longer. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I don't, that to me was the greatest point in that entire film, was the realization that
Yeah.
Grace was not willing at all, but he became someone who you can entrust all of humanity to now, and then he's
Mm.
willing to sacrifice himself again to save Rocky at the end of it. So it's like he was not, he was forced to be, and then he actively chose later on, because he's a new and better person because of all the stuff he had to go through. And it
Yeah.
was just like
Yeah.
phenomenal work.
Yeah. It's so good. And it makes me think how, I mean, he didn't have an immediate family on Earth. That
Mm-mm.
in the German woman's mind made him like the ideal candidate to go because, no one's going to miss him. And he, was his PhD who kind of flamed out and was teaching whatever middle school, elementary school science. And it, it's almost like it took him having like genuine love reflected to him and like genuine belief for him to evolve and like become um who he really was at the core of it. And I think I think that was just really touching to me because like I could see a lot of like my younger self in who he thought he was, someone who
Mm-hmm.
like doesn't doesn't think they're capable of rising to the occasion and is kind of having that like reflected by other people, and then it takes one person to like I've long thought that like the role of a mentor is to see the good in someone before they've seen it in themselves, and create this kind of like aspirational self. And at the end, I was like, oh, like yeah, I don't actually know if he's going to go back to Earth, and like he'd be kind of crazy not to. And then I was like, well, I think he has more love on this planet than like everyone thinks he's a hero on, and I mean, people would think that way of him on Earth as well, but um, like I mean, it was really like clear that it was like Rocky's belief in him and love for him that like changed things. And it was like that that version of himself was there all along. It just like it just hadn't had
Occasion to
someone else
rise,
reflect it to him. Hmm.
or someone else. Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Someone who trusted him and encouraged him to the point where he's willing to rise. Because I guess with the lady, she was like, she was very cold, and he was always trying to be warm to her. And the only
Mm.
real warm thing you got was the scene where she went and did the part of the karaoke, because he
Yeah,
was saying you need to be somebody that everybody trusts, and to be that kind of person you need to show that you are human, which I've seen a little bit of, but you still keep a distance. um and Rocky was just from start to finish like, Grace, you're amazing, look at you, you've come so far, I'm so proud of you. And that allowed him to really bond. And then whenever he was saved by Rocky, he also, I guess, had the opportunity then to feel the weight of what losing someone who cares about you feels like, since he didn't have anyone who cared about him to lose previously.
mm. Mm. Hmm.
So maybe that was one of the ways of transformations. It was that emotional connection that he had, where he's like, oh, somebody actually depends on me now. Like, I know what it means to put your life on the line for somebody, and for somebody to put their life on the line for you, in an act of self will, not of any force outside.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, just what a great film. Do you
Yeah.
think because you said it related to like a younger version of yourself,
Mm.
in kind of like what way would you say it related in the past to you, to who you are now?
Hmm. I think um, I think I had this belief about myself. Um, like I remember my dad telling me once that um, he's like, I think you're the type of friend who like can be with someone in like their lowest moment, but like in like a crisis, like I don't know if you'd be the you'd be the person to call. I'm like, wow, thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
But I think I had this thought about myself that like I would. I mean, I was a very anxious and like kind of scared kid. There was just a lot of like emotional volatility at home, like threat of violence at a lot of times, and I would kind of cower in fear in response to that. And so there was just always this thought that like if push came to shove, and I think like you're trying to figure out what it means to be a man in like your teenage years, and you have kind of all these different ideas about what that means, and um, I think I didn't feel like I could like rise to the occasion and like be like a, a protector, or like if I was called upon for something, that I would be able to you know walk into the burning house and like save the baby or whatever it might be.
You were
um
like
and
Spider-Man in the second one, but without the powers. You're like,
yeah,
am I the kind of person
exactly.
who just naturally would go and help others if the occasion
Yeah,
called,
yeah,
when I don't have power?
exactly. Yeah, or like like am I the one who like just you know stays in the Shire when like an opportunity for like a harrowing adventure is like presented to me or something. um and I think it was like a combination of like the love and trust from others, and also like I think my own personal relationship with God, and like the mystery of God, um, that I've kind of been able to shed that, and step into um, just more of a sense that like the world like the world is full of stress and trauma, but it's also not a scary place. Like it's a beautiful place, and I think that was just like a shift that has been like, the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years of my life. Um, yeah, but I think what I related to so much with that movie is like, I think that the typical ways people think of like, boys becoming men is we send them off to the military, or we put them through, grueling physical trials, or, we like deprive them of things and see how they can survive. And that's certainly, a way of getting there. But I think, um, a different way is like presenting someone with, call it a calling, that like only they can really answer. Like only he could have, I mean, because he was literally the only one up there, like only he could have risen to the occasion to save the world. And I think every person has like some something that only they can really rise to the occasion and meet. Like for someone else, it may seem insane. I mean, for a lot of people in my life, it's like the idea of sitting with people's feelings and deepest, darkest thoughts is like insane. But like for me, it just makes sense. But, my girlfriend's a physician assistant, and she wants to like go into like wilderness medication, and it's like I am so squeamish with blood, and like that to me
Uh,
is like crazy, but for her it's like she thrives being in crisis like that, and I thrive being in a different a different kind of crisis. And I think, I think if you're fortunate enough to have people, or to just have like, I mean, I've met people who just have like a deep self confidence, or intuition about what it is that they're put on the planet to do. Um, I think that can really go a long way in like helping you shepherd yourself into maturity. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know if I've ever like answered question, that exact question, but hopefully some of that made sense.
I think so. I was talking to a coworker the other day, and I think I was trying to state to him the same kind of idea where everyone individually has something that they're supposed to be. Because I was trying to say, because we were talking about like purpose and meaning in life, and he was
Hmm.
like, he had the stance of you have to choose your own meaning, and I have over the course of my life come to the the feeling that actually I don't get to choose my own meaning. It's like meaning is something higher than me. Like it's something outside of me. Meaning is almost objective. But my individual purpose inside of the higher objective meaning, everybody has an individual part to play inside of that. And so the way I was describing it is like you have God, who is, the creator of all things. Meaning is derived from him. He is the outside force from which meaning is first derived, and then every single human exists individually, because to him there is no repeat of any single person, which is why he considers everybody as valuable, and why he says you have to treat everyone with the same level of respect you would treat your closest friend and family members, um, because you're trying to get them to see their worth and their meaning. And the idea of why I don't really accept that you get to choose your own meaning is, like, say that you're somebody who has chosen to become the greatest warrior. You're like, my meaning is to be the strongest warrior who's ever lived. Sounds really inspirational, makes for an awesome story, but at some point you're going to meet somebody else who's made their meaning to be the strongest warrior that's ever lived. Well, when both of you arrive and fight each other, you both have the
Mm,
exact same goal, and if you fight to the death, one of you has fulfilled meaning and the other one has failed to fulfill meaning, which means his life was
yeah.
meaningless because he chose that. You know? And so it's like,
Mm,
so you have, if you are the one who chooses your own meaning, meaning is something that is actually capable of being failed at. But if meaning is
yeah.
something that is derived from the outside, but you were created specifically to fulfill a piece of that meaning, then every single person can, in tandem, have an entirely unique part of meaning, work together to help each other complete their meaning, and it means that everyone gets to go upwards at the exact same time and be satisfied together. So it's like, I think meaning
Hmm.
is something outside, but your part in the meaning is so individualistic that no one else could ever touch what was meant for you. And so it's like, I want
Yeah.
you to find your meaning and I want me to find my meaning, and then I want both of us to work together to arrive at our meanings together.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think the relation to the kingdom of heaven is so important, because
Mm-hmm.
if we all just choose our own meanings, then we're all kind of like we're all playing our own game. We're all playing we're all in our own virtual realities, playing our own games, and we don't come together. And that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of the disaster, I think, of postmodernism, to not
Yes.
get too dramatic. Is like we went from kind of our meanings being given to us, like you are going to work in your dad's metal shop and that's going to kind of be it. And, women are going to stay at home or whatever, to, liberation from that. And I think that has been incredible for the world, like in giving people opportunity that they didn't previously have. But now there's this world where, um, it's about me and my authenticity, and there isn't really any sort of like orientation towards something shared, towards like the communal.
Mm-hmm.
um and I think yeah, I mean, another thing in what you said with like the example of the warrior example, and being the best at it, is like that's a very um it's a very closed idea. It's like either you are or you aren't, or you aren't,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like true meaning is like it's open ended. It's it's oriented towards virtues or values, or like a certain stance towards reality that you kind of always have to like continuously train or deepen into. There is no like end. There is no end to it. um and so yeah, I agree with that. I'm curious to throw it back to you though, because I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people who have that view of your coworker probably have that view because at some level they want to feel in control of their life. Like they want to feel like their choices aren't arbitrary, that they can author their own lives. And so, like, what would you say to someone who feels like meaning that's been bestowed from on high is kind of fatalistic or deterministic or something. Because
Well,
I don't feel, because I agree with you, but I also don't feel like it's deterministic. Like I actually feel like it's opened my life up a lot more than it had before.
yeah. Could you first define what you mean by deterministic and fatalistic? So, because I feel like I can't
Mhm.
answer quite properly unless I know what
Right,
you
right,
mean.
right, right. Like the sense that ev our decisions and everything, in life, in reality, has been decided for us, and that there is no free will in
Hmm.
that. So, like in the context of this, like if I don't get to choose my own meaning, and in some sense, like meaning has been chosen for me, then does that basically just mean that I'm like handcuffed to this meaning, and that I don't have any agency in that? Um, like, what would your response be, I guess, to someone who has that view?
I'm gonna use. I just recently. I don't have it within arm's reach, but I've been going through C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, so I'm gonna reference that
Mm,
and a couple other things. So there's in the Space Trilogy, in the second book, um, Ransom is on a planet that has it's very new. He's essentially entering the Garden of Eden of another planet. So there's no evil that has taken root inside of this planet. And then Satan arrives inside of another man's body. Like Satan himself can't get onto this world except through the avatar of another human being. So Satan starts talking to the green woman because in this new world the humans there are green, just a differential feature. Um, and Ransom and the other person from Earth who is overtaken by Satan, basically for the span of like a couple weeks, are just talking to this lady over and over and over again about philosophy and meaning and purpose. And Satan tells the lady, because she says, I'm not supposed to do anything against Maleldil, who is God. That's the name for him. And he goes, well, Satan tells her, like, is not the greatest expression of meaning disobedience to the
mm,
one who gave you the option? Because he's like, if he wants you to have will, then the greatest act of will is to reject his wish. And Ransom has a really hard time reckoning with all these different philosophical thoughts that Satan's putting out, because he's like in a sense, yes, that would be the greatest form of expression, uh, but it's not good. And taking it to the real world now, where we have like maximum freedom for everyone. It's like we've accomplished what everyone wanted, which is there are no holds barred, and in some instances, you're like pushed towards a thing you don't even want, and you don't have to accept it. But it's just like this path is so much easier because we've made such an effort to go that direction in the name of freedom. And for me, the answer I kind of thought is it's like I like that we have the ability to reject and to accept, but I know by accepting that there is this meaning above that I am actively choosing to be a part of, that this is greater. It's like this is what is intended. This is the path of least resistance. And a lot of people want to fight against the path of least resistance. They're like, the idea of taking the easiest path just means I'm weak. And I'm like, well, not necessarily. Like, sometimes the path you're meant to take is to be someone who wakes up every day and plows a field by hand. That's not at all a weak path, but it could be the correct and intended path for you. And if you were the kind of person who was like, well, would you rather go plow a field by hand every day, or would you like to be a philosophy professor? And it's like guaranteed either one succeeds. A lot of people are going to say philosophy professor because like it's just easier, it sounds more fun, it sounds like better or more high status. And it's like, yeah, but what if regardless of the level of success you'd achieve with either, your true fulfillment would come from accepting that you need to plow a field every day. So I know I feel like the most satisfying meaning isn't to reject and choose your own path, which could potentially fail and which will likely most of the time fail because life's hard, and instead take the path intended, which will also have failures, but at all times while you're pursuing it, you'll just be like, there's a deeper level of satisfaction knowing you're heading towards something that is intended and it is right and it is good than pursuing something that you don't know will succeed, don't know if it's right, and don't know if the end of it is good. So it's like, I could go down this way, but I know there is another path. And because I'm already, like, in my own life right now, I am cognizant of the majority of this path. So I'm pursuing that path. I've had, again, I have had troubles accepting going this direction. And I've also, aside from trying to head other directions, struggled to even continue on in a direction because I realized I had thoughts and pursuits that I wanted to do, and I'm like, these things aren't wrong, but it was also recognition of it. It's like, yes, but not yet. You have to go through this other section first, and so it's really frustrating to be in the yes but not yet part because you're like, well, I know later on this is a part of it, but I have to reject the later portion right now. And for like with my coworker, he actually also had a really bad life, and his dad was abusive to their family. So he's got a really bad framework for God and religion whatsoever. He'll be like, his conversation's always a bit odd because he'll kind of take an atheistic framework on everything, and then he'll state later on that he believes that there's a higher power. And then whenever you're like, well, what is a higher power? He kind of like rejects anything you put out for it, which I think is kind of funny. I don't think he realizes that he's got all these contradictory ideas in his head. So for him, it was weird when he told me one of his ideas for meaning or one of the goals in life, because I was like, I don't think I agree with that at all, but I could understand how he came to that conclusion because I was like, God is our Father, and He wants us to be one with Him, as in like walking together in the Garden of Eden. And he was like, and for him, he said the point of having a father and being a son is for you to overtake the father. And I was like, interesting. That's like almost identical to Satan's reason for the fall. He's like, I want to be greater than God. Although I would say my friend's sense of needing to be greater comes from a different place than Satan's needing to be greater than God, because Satan's was, I hate being second fiddle, whereas my coworker's proposition would much more likely be that this person was actually bad, so if I'm not better than him, I am worse than him, which means I'm a terrible person. Which it's like, well, yes, you are correct in that estimation. So, but for me, right, it's like I always tell people, I'm like, it's hard for me to directly relate with people who have gone through a lot. I feel things very deeply, but I've actually had one of the most pampered lives ever, is what I tell people. I'm like thoroughly middle class, but both of my parents loved me and treated me really well, you know? So it's just like I didn't have everything I wanted, but at no point was I ever sad. Uh, and
It's
so I
weird
was,
because that is like such an it's like such an ordinary life on the face of it, but it's like
it's
it
super
feels like a needle in a
extraordinary.
haystack. Yeah, it's like yeah, in today's day and age, it's like wow, that what I wouldn't kill for just a normal life.
Yeah, it's like I still see them like every other week. They live like an hour away, and my mom's always like, "You should come over every day." I was like, "I'm not coming over every day, mother. I'm sorry." Um, but it's like I still have a perfectly fine relationship. Well, I say fine, a very good relationship with both of them. I still do things with them pretty regularly. And yeah, it's a little depressing being like, it's like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, and it's like, well, it is how it's supposed to be, but unfortunately, most people have not experienced that. Is what I discovered, and I was like, that's really sad. But from my reference, I was like, I do not have any need or desire to be better than my father, because my father was a morally upstanding man in my life, and then two, the things that he wants out of life aren't things that I want. So I'm not competing with him in any
Mm,
way, shape, or form. It's not like he
mhm.
was this Olympic athlete and now I'm determined to be an athlete and beat his world record, which maybe or maybe couldn't happen. But instead, they were really good at just being like, whatever you want to do, son. That's what you do. Just make sure that you love God the whole time. No, so I was like, I don't have a need to become greater than my father. I just need to be in love with my father and work with him. And so I was kind of trying to explain that to him. And so I guess I'm still going on to the same original question of just meaning. So it's just I'm not choosing to become better than your father and to
Mm.
reject the meaning outside of you that you get to be a part of. I think will lead you to more misery because it has the potential to fail. But if you realize that there's a meaning outside of you and you accept that and you pursue that meaning with the one who gives meaning, you're just getting guaranteed meaning down the line mixed with someone to walk down that path with, which is God. So, spent like 8 to 12 minutes saying that. It'd be really hard to convey that to somebody in a real quick. It's like, what's the meaning of life? Well, you see.
Oh, yeah. Did you ever have a time in your life where that felt sense of the meaning outside of you was not there, or was that always consistent for you?
There are still, like, even now, I think the best example is kind of like David in the Bible. It's like the man after God's own heart. That was the description given of him. And then you read the Psalms, and I don't know if it's the majority, but at least half of all of the Psalms are him just being like, life sucks, right? It's
Yeah.
like, dude, you outside of the prophets are the only other person who has direct contact with God, and you're saying life sucks. And that was a lot of his psalms. So it's just like, uh, I've had incredibly deep depressions and periods of depression where it's just like crying myself to sleep every night,
Mm-hmm.
because for me primarily it's like loneliness. I really want to not be. I have never really been able to connect very deeply with people on a mental level because my brain just does not operate like anyone else's I've ever met. So I've always felt ostracized because I hate small talk and I hate football. And
Hmm.
where I live, small talk and football were like the only two things. And I was like, yes, but did you guys read Les Miserables? And they're like, I stopped reading books whenever I finished reading When You Give a Mouse a Cookie, And so
Yeah, yeah.
I was like always disconnected from everybody else in that, and it just made it to where you not from any fault of anybody's, it's just natural. Um, you hang out with people who you have the most in common with, and since nobody had anything in common with me, nobody ever wanted to hang out with me. Even if I invited them places, they just like make excuses. And I also went through a stint where I started heading down a pretty psychopathic loop because I was trying to get attention, and then I realized I was like, maybe this isn't the right way of doing it because people seem to be rejecting this way of interacting with them, and loop back around to where I am in a much better place now. Took a lot of figuring out social norms that people just don't tell you up front, and you find out through trial and error what those things are, to the point where I've even considered writing a book of just everything I've learned about socializing with people, because I was like, if I needed this, other
Good.
people probably need this too.
Hmm.
um, and now my brain has forgotten what the original question was, if you remember, because I know I was getting close to the end.
Um, yeah, what if there were any times in your life where
Mm,
that felt sense of a meaning beyond you, and also like what your meaning is, what your, chosen or chosen for you path is, how you came to clarify that for yourself.
okay. Yeah. So going back to that point of depression, um, part something I had to develop because I realized that my emotions would go out of whack a lot, and whenever you are depressed, it becomes nearly impossible to remember what you were aiming for.
Yep.
So something that I try and tell everybody is I'm like, you have to just develop the personality of putting in effort no matter how bad you feel. Because if you stop moving forward, you could potentially move backwards. And if you're moving backwards, you're actually going to potentially lose the meaning that you were aiming for. But if you can still keep moving forwards, even though you're depressed, whenever you finally get out of the depression, and the way out of the depression most of the time is to move forwards anyways, it I haven't sidestepped, but I've gotten myself to a point where when I hit those moments where I lose sight of what meaning is, I still move forward trying to accomplish it anyways. And for myself, what I currently view as meaning, or what I'm supposed to do, is I remember telling my mother one day, I was like, if I can't use this camera in some way, shape, or form to create things and that be my career, I'd rather just die right now. And she was like, absolute nonsense, because my parents, this is the biggest problem I have with my parents. Both of them are incredibly blue collar, and neither of them, like, movies and stories affect them, but they never stop and say, you know what? I really want a movie that covers this topic and makes me feel this way. And I'm over here like, I really need a story that covers this topic and does this thing. To the point where I was like always in front of the TV watching a new movie or a TV show or something, and they'd be like, don't you want to do something outside? And I'm like, but it's not a story outside. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So trying to convey to them that I was like, I love art and I want to create art in some way, shape, or form was a thing that also took a long time to realize. To where I was like, why do I have such a natural ability to make people laugh or cry, or I have like such a strong innate sense of rhythm and have a strong affinity for like gymnastics and dancing, even though I've never done any of these things. And why do I watch movies so much and care so deeply about them to the point where whenever somebody's like, my favorite film is this film, I'm like personally offended whenever that film is actually trash. Like, why would you waste your time watching that horrible film? And people don't like it whenever you trash on the things that they enjoy. And I'm like, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, look, you can enjoy it, but can you at least acknowledge that it's not good? And they're like, no, it's amazing. What are you talking about? I'm like, there are better movies. And you show them a really good movie, and then they're just like, that meant nothing to me. And you're like, no, this is everything. No. So I guess what I see as meaning right now is trying to share and create stories that help and change people. And they're like part of, I started off doing photography because that seemed to be taking off. And the problem I've always had is, even in my life all the time, getting people to show up to things. I just don't have, what I tell everybody is like, everyone has a natural charisma stat, and mine is like 2. To the point where I discovered that if you are friends with somebody who has a high charisma stat, if you ask them to start a party for you, that everyone will show up to the party that they created. But if you invited people to that party, no one would show up. So just handy tip, if there's something that you want to start and you don't think you have the social capital to invite people to it, find another person who has the social capital with those same people.
Everyone needs a wingman.
Yes, everyone needs a wingman. Yeah. So it's like, I need a wingman for like socialization. So I had a really hard time creating anything initially because everyone just was like, nah, I don't want to do that. And so I had to get to the point where I was like, I had to continue to pull away all of the grand ideas I had until I found at the very core the thing I could do by myself with literally nobody else's involvement. And that was what, if you saw my channel now, I literally sit down and I read fairy tales and then I talk about what I thought about them and try not like there has to be a moral in this. It's literally just sitting down and talking about what I think about the story, if I think the story shows up in any other stories or patterns. And then at the end of all of the discussions, I always ask people, I'm like, what did you get out of the story? Because I'm just trying to, at this moment, start discussions. And then I always had in my head loads of stories where I was like, this would be so cool if this existed. And it's like, the older you get and the more you see the way that Hollywood's going, you're like, absolutely nobody would create this story because they're too morally corrupt or they just don't get it. So you're like, I guess I just have to start creating those stories. But if I want people to see them, I've got to get people to look at me first. So I guess I have to get attention on me. And then I was like, well, YouTube's a good way of getting people to finding your tribe, I guess. Is a good way of putting it. So like, I'm just going to start by posting everything on YouTube, and I'm going to write down all of my ideas, and hopefully I can create something. And I like comics, and I'm really bad. I know I couldn't write a book because I don't have the mind for writing a book, but I could write a screenplay and I could write a comic book, and then I could make my comics into screenplays later because they're not too far off from each other. So the idea is at some point to create, get enough people's attention and then start making the stories that I've been meaning to create and find the people who would be interested in those and spreading it out. And hopefully as well, getting other people to start creating things too, because I realized whenever you're a creative person and you're not creating and you're surrounded by people who don't know that you're a creative person and just don't get what the deal is with creativity, it's really hard to be creative, and it's hard to find satisfaction when you've created something when no one else really gets it. They'll be like my parents were always like, we're fine if you're a photographer, just get a real job first. And it's like, well, this is a real job if you can get it to work, but I always hated how they unintentionally, in trying to support me, made me feel like I was choosing something dumb to pursue.
Yeah.
Uh, and it and the entire reason is it was just that they want
Or
me to
something
have a
that
good life.
isn't, yeah, or something that isn't valuable,
Yeah,
like valuable enough on its own, to stand on its own.
yeah. So it was like it's totally understandable. They're like, we want you to have a good and a comfortable life, and it's easier to have a good and comfortable life working a 9 to 5. And it's like, true, but I am okay with making less money if I feel like I have accomplished the thing that I'm here for. And creation is what I have the strongest feeling for. And ever since I started pursuing that much more wholeheartedly, I've been like, okay, yeah, this feels significantly better now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, there's so much that I'm just interested in with your story and can relate to myself. I think, yeah, I think that that sense of, football and small talk being at the core of most social interactions, like, um it sounds like you're from the Midwest.
I
That's what I'm gathering.
Louisiana, where I'm
Louisiana,
from.
okay. South.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
the blue
yeah,
collar is like the name of everyone's game here. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's sports and working at a plant, or being
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
carpenter or a plumber or something.
Totally, totally.
Which it
Yeah.
bothers me because whenever you look into the history of Louisiana, it was like the origin point for all the different cultural movements. It's
Hmm.
like where the origin point of jazz, and from jazz spreading out to all the other places is almost where every other, it's like jazz was like the origin point of almost every other genre of music that America spawned. And
Yeah,
then aside
yeah.
from that, we used to just be one of the largest cultural hubs for like artwork, because there used to be humongous murals painted constantly everywhere, and you'll still see a lot of hints of that, and there's still a lot of festivals, but it's kind of like the art, the culture of art that we had being the driving force that we used to have seems to have died away, and now art is more of a really strong subculture. And I'm like, if I could get in charge, I'd want to make Louisiana the hub of art and culture of America again. So,
Hmm.
but you gotta create art and culture first and get people's attention on it. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm jazz is like my favorite genre of music, so I've like always wanted to go to New Orleans. I haven't gotten there yet, but
It's kind of funny because
yeah.
I tell people, I'm like, New Orleans is great for a vacation, especially if you come from um, another state, because there's literally like at minimum one of everything in New Orleans. I was like, but anyone who is going to live in Louisiana is like, don't ever go to New Orleans
Yeah.
because
Yeah, I've heard that.
it it that's the majority of homeless people, the majority of crimes, and the majority of bad smells you will ever come across are all within New Orleans. And as soon as you go outside of New Orleans, because the rest of Louisiana also has these things, but they're just spread further out, so it's harder to find them. So it's like,
Yeah.
everything you want exists down here in some capacity. It's just so centered inside of New Orleans that if you're coming to visit, excellent spot to visit, because it's the French Quarter. You got loads of different pubs and places you can get alcohol, or uh, local local music. Like all that stuff is captured down there. If there's ever a convention, it's always in New Orleans because there are giant convention halls. There's an insectarium, aquarium, and like side by side, and there's a zoo further outside of the city. It's like it literally has one of everything. But if you're gonna live here, the family units, the real strong family units, all exist outside of New Orleans in places like Denham and Baton Rouge and Slidell.
Hmm.
Just the further out you go, the stronger the family unit gets. But So New Orleans is one of my least favorite places to visit in Louisiana, personally,
Yeah.
living out here. But for anybody else, I'm like you enjoy it because you see so many
Yeah.
things condensed into one really small area that you just wouldn't see anywhere else.
Yeah. 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 I'm from Northern California, so I feel the same way about San Francisco. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, beautiful place to visit for a weekend or a week, but yeah, I would never choose to live there. But
I went to
yeah, I
Hollywood once, and
mean,
I was like, never again.
no, no, yeah, 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 no. Southern California, I like avoid like the plague if I can. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's kind of just back to your last share. It's I think there's another thing that I was thinking about as you were talking about moving forward throughout the depression. I think that's really profound, um, and a perspective that I haven't, heard that much is like I've just noticed for myself as I've transitioned away from. I mean, I still am not at the point where I'm like able to be financially compensated for, therapy. Like I'm still in school, so I'm like I've taken, other jobs, and most of them at some point or another have become extremely miserable. But I've noticed as I've transitioned to not just like transitioned to deciding this is like my career, but like really embrace that like this is what I'm put on this, planet to do, being able to bear those low moments or those like frustrations or, the moments in all of our lives that we have to do things that we don't want to do, it just makes it a lot easier to be able to bear that. And I think if are going through a low, or anyone is going through a low, but you have an understanding of like, okay, like I'm gonna return to this thing, and this like I'm always able to return to this thing, and like my life has value, and I have belonging in the world as well. Like, um, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel a lot more easily than like if you're just in like pure despair. Um, and so I think like the, and I think there's also, if it's just up to you, if it's just like, oh, this is my chosen meaning, I think it also becomes a lot easier to quit when the going gets tough. Because it's like, okay, well, I'll just pick a different one. Like, this isn't working out. I'll just like do something else. Um, and I think that can also happen in the context of like following, God's meaning for you. Because, for example, for you, I imagine your creative medium might change, or what you discuss on your channel might change. Like those things might change, but there's still kind of an overarching like vision for your life. Um, and I think if you respond to a meaning that has kind of been bestowed to you, it's like, okay, like I have to do this every day, like, or else I'm not responding to that call, and um, I think that at least for me has been, because I've also had points of real depression and suicidality, and um, that has always just like helped me get out of bed in the morning. um, and yeah, I mean, it's hard to put into words. I think especially articulating to someone who hasn't experienced that yet. um, but that, yeah, that was just like I was just reflecting on that as you were talking of like, oh yeah, like having that sense helps you move through the depression. But then I kind of wonder, like, kind of a chicken and egg thing. Like, does that come before you're able to move through the depression, or is having that stance in, I just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other during those moments, like, is that what then leads to the kind of the breakthrough moment? Maybe for you, like, what did you kind of find what it was you were meant to do and that helped you have that perspective? Or were you able to kind of have that perspective just kind of believing like, okay, if I get through this, if I keep, pushing through, eventually there's gonna there's gonna be something worthwhile on the other end.
I think it it'd be impossible for me to say this is how it could work for somebody else because I started
Yeah.
in one spot, ended up at another spot, and I'm moving forward more in a sense back to the start I started from, because it was like,
Mm,
having always believed in God, there was always the sense of there's meaning and there's purpose, and the end of the story is happy, regardless of how sad it gets in the middle. So when I first hit the zones of depression where it's like, woe is me, life is meaningless, I'm but a vapor, you you won't feel the meaning in those moments because
yeah.
that's why it's depression. It's like you are
Mhm.
incapable of feeling anything else in that time span. Uh, I think a way of presenting it is like, imagine you go into a tunnel because you see a light at the end of the tunnel, and then all of a sudden it turns into nighttime while you're in the tunnel, so you can't see the end of the tunnel anymore. So it can put you into this state of panic where you're like, there is no light at the end of the tunnel now. And it's not that there isn't a light at the end of the tunnel, it's that in this moment you're in, there is no light at the end of the tunnel. And you can
Right.
just sit down, which means you're not making progress towards the light that will return, or you could turn away, which means now you're going back to the place that you were trying to leave from. And for most people, going back to the place where you're trying to leave from is the wrong answer, because the reason you left in the first place is that you were leaving something that was bad. Kind of like for you, you're like, my life was terrible, and then you went to therapy and he helped you find where you needed to go. So for you,
Hmm.
continuing to walk forward, even if you had to like walk backwards and then forwards again over and over, being
Yeah.
part of your story, it's going to be a little bit different. But so I just came to the realization, it was like, okay, but even in the moments where I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, I know it's there. So I have to just keep walking forward anyways. And if we were going to use the example of a maze, it's like, why am I walking inside of this maze when I don't know where the path is? Like, I don't have the map to the maze. I'm literally aimless inside of the maze. It's like, well, I could just sit down and stop, or I could start backtracking in hopes that I won't get lost going back towards the beginning of the maze, or I could continue walking through the maze knowing that there is an end and that there are limited options of wrong turns I can make. So it's like,
Mm.
at some
Hmm.
point, I'm going to arrive at the end. So I'd rather arrive as soon as possible, because once you arrive at the end, you will have the joy of arriving. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
forward momentum is the only way to get to the joy that drives you faster. The one thing I will say, I had to learn the difference between like getting up every day and doing what you need to do versus burning yourself out moving too much, because you do have to stop walking every once in a while to catch your breath. Um,
Yep.
so if anyone finds this and thinks I have to get up every single day, it's like, no, there are days where you can just sleep in. It's okay. But if you allow yourself to just stop, then there's an issue. Which is why I think people who are choose to be therapists um, are quite good people, because I had to build on my own that sense of moving forward and working through the pain,
Yeah.
which built some bad habits. And now, whenever most of those bad habits are gone now. And now, whenever I see somebody and they're like, I'm depressed, and I'm like, get out of bed and do something, and they're like, no, I can't. And I'm just like, I'm so impatient. I'm like, I want to help you, but you have refused to get out of bed as being the first step. So I'm moving on without you, which isn't necessarily the healthiest thing, which is why I had considered doing therapy as my job in the past. And I was like, I'm not a nice enough person. I'm also not patient enough, because as a therapist, you're going to, I'm certain, come across people who are like, just give up and fail over and over again to move forward on things
Hmm.
that they say they're going to do. And I was like, I'm a really impatient person. I'd at certain points with my clients just be like, I think we're done here because you're not making any progress. And it would be like 3 weeks in of them saying that they couldn't do
Referral.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
sorry, you need somebody else. I was like, on the other hand, if I was that blunt, I was like, maybe there's somebody in therapy who would need me for my bluntness. But I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
I mean, there's definitely different styles and different, people. Some people want the kind of like tell me what to do, like drag my ass out of bed, like. And I mean, I think at different moments you kind of do need to be. Yeah, I mean, I would say I think if I had one criticism of the field, I think there is like a certain aversion to um kind of directness, and I definitely know that is the case for myself. Um, and I think by nature I'm also a pretty impatient person. And so I think like as you were speaking, like I definitely notice I've thought and sometimes verbalized the same to people in my life, like, okay, like, like you got to meet me in the middle. Like
mm-hmm.
if I'm gonna like be your friend and, like be trusted to at times, give you advice or suggestions about things. It's like, if you're depressed, like, I'm not going to ask you to train for a marathon, but like, let's take a shower. Let's comb our hair in the morning, and that, like, I mean, I know you've been there and I've been there too. Like in those moments,
Yeah,
that
combing my
literally
hair.
does
I've
feel
been
like,
there.
yeah, 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 yeah. Shaving it every once in a while.
uh,
Yeah, I have a bald friend, and he was like, "Yeah, I shaved my head the other day." It's like, I wonder how often how often you do that.
uh,
But
yeah, for me, it's like once a month.
yeah, yeah. Um, but I mean, in those moments, like that, that does feel like a victory. Like, getting out of bed, and that's what I mean. That's what therapists do with people that are really depressed. It's like you break it down into the smallest possible step, and then you like really celebrate that hard. Like, oh wow, like
Mm.
you got out of bed today. You did not get out of bed yesterday. Like, and that, that reinforces like, okay, I'm actually on a positive journey. And I mean, I think a lot of people who are depressed like struggle with, and this was kind of what I was going to ask you with like the moving forward is like, um, and you kind of did allude to it, but like like I'm also that person, like I always have to feel like I'm moving, I'm progressing, I'm evolving, whatever. I'm putting my stuff out there. Um, and I can struggle with acceptance and like appreciation for where I am now. Um, and what you were talking about earlier with like the like not yetness, like just being able to be comfortable in that. And I think what has helped me is to have that have that felt sense that like in every moment, if I'm wherever stage I am on the path, like um, I'm loved in God's eyes, and like I am fulfilling or helping to fulfill His will,
Mhm.
in every moment. Like it's not just when I get to whatever proverbial finish line. Because as soon as you get to one finish line, it's like you start another race, right? Like as soon as you
Yeah.
finish one creative project, it's like it's on to the next. So it's like if you look at life that way, like you're always gonna feel behind or, whatever. And so yeah, like I've really had to learn how to balance without that becoming like complacency or something, like balancing and I think the language of like in a liminal space has really helped me because that is what it kind of feels like. Like I'm both appreciative of where I am, but I'm also like one eye is on the next horizon kind of thing. Um, so yeah, I wonder how that shows up in your life.
Uh, hmm. I feel like I do have a hard time allowing myself to appreciate where I am because, like, I have a house and a pretty decent job, and I'm like, it sounds so bad because I have a job that pays for the house and for most everything that I want. And so it's like I've basically got everything, but I tell people I'm like, man, even though this job basically pays for everything, every single morning that I get up, I'm just like, I'd almost rather just move back in with my parents and lose the house. And it's like, obviously, I wouldn't like that more if I was to actually do that. Um, but I know that that is a lack of appreciation, and even for the house, um, I wouldn't say that it's too small for me, but just the way that the house is structured is so not how I would structure a house to be built. So I can't walk through my house the way I'd want to walk through a house to live inside of it. So it's like, you know, thanks be to God that I have a house, but couldn't it have been a little bit of a better house, you know? Uh
Yeah.
it feels like Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof. He's like, there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
being poor, but it wouldn't have been bad if it was better and I was
I would.
rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so I guess that's kind of why, like in the Lord's Prayer, it's like always say thanks for the bread, even if you don't feel like it, because you're forcing yourself to acknowledge where you've come and that you are
Mm,
appreciative regardless of your current emotional state. And
yeah.
that's one of those fickle things. Like I said before, I kind of went to a time period where I was going a little bit more sociopathic, and that was because I was being really hurt by a lot of people. And I was like, well, I could just stop feeling emotions, and that would be a way to not be in pain anymore. And it's like, obviously, that's the wrong answer. What you need to do is work on yourself and also potentially change the people that you're hanging out with until you find people that you can be open with, so that you have joy. Not that experiencing no emotions at the end is worse than experiencing negative emotions, because the negative emotions could potentially lead you to actions that will allow you to end up experiencing primarily good emotions. Um,
Yeah.
and so, it's just, and also I know they say comparison is the thief of joy, but comparison can also be a reason that you appreciate the things you've got more,
Mm,
because for at the time that I got the house for my age, like all of my other friends could not find a house or even an apartment they could afford, and I had a job that I didn't like, but it paid for the house, and I had a house, and they couldn't find either. And it took them roughly like 4 more years for the majority of them to find something at the same level or even lower than what I've got. So,
Mm.
on one end, it's like it's not what I want ideally, but I can look at my friend's situation and just be like, but I am so much further than the majority of them
Yeah.
by just having something. And, it's kind of like eat your food because the kids in Africa are starving. And it's like, well,
Hmm.
now my stomach's too full. And that's not why people say eat your food is to, like make you fat, but it's to try and make you appreciative. It's just a bad way of phrasing it. It's like, hey, don't complain about your food because you have food, and that's something that for the majority of humanity was quite the achievement every single day to come by. And I'm over here
Yeah.
trying to burn off the excess calories that most people never experienced in their entire existence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you might be eating food that you had as a kid, but now you realize you don't like anymore, or oh shoot, I developed a lactose intolerance.
Yeah,
I
I,
can't
I
have
became
dairy
allergic
anymore,
to
and it's like
kiwi, and that was really frustrating because I used to eat kiwi pretty often. I would just like eat a whole
yeah,
kiwi. Now I can't.
I've heard that happen to people. I had a friend who became allergic to bananas, I think watermelon as well, like weird
Ooh,
fruits that I've never
yeah.
heard of, and I was like, man, that is really rough.
If you
Like,
come to Louisiana, you'll hear about watermelon. Don't worry.
yeah, 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 definitely. Well, unfortunately, I do have to run
Time's
soon,
up.
so
Okay. Well, I
yeah,
do always have a few questions right at the end that are really short.
please,
All right.
rapid
So
fire.
number one, what is your favorite poem that everyone should read? Where you're like, this is the magnum
Ooh,
opus so far.
ooh, man. Um, hmm. Well, that's tough. I'm so bad at remembering. Like, so Rilke is my favorite poet, and
Who's your favorite poet? Because that was the another question.
Ril Rilke,
How do I spell that?
Rilke,
Rilke. Is that
and all.
uh? Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, Rainier Maria Rilke, full name. He's a German poet, and all of his poems are untitled. So I'm really bad at like, you know, being able to associate. But
Where
if I
where
were
could
to
I
say
find his
one,
stuff?
um, my favorite book of his is Rilke's Book of Hours. It was written during he lived in a Russian monastery for a year,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like in his early 20s, and he wrote this book of poems, and it's separated into three categories: the book of the monastic life, the life of poverty, and I can't remember the third one. And so it's
Okay,
all just poems about his relationship with God. So I'm going to cheat a little bit on the question and give you a whole book. Um,
works for me. That
that's
was
my
one of the
favorite book.
questions. All right,
Yeah.
so, but you've written poetry of your own
Hmm.
poets or poems that you've written. What's your favorite? Which is the one that you want people to read?
Mm. I have a poem called it's an ekphrastic poem on what's the name of the song? It's a song by Cat Stevens, and it's not good that I blanking on the name now. Father and Son. So it's titled Ekphrastic Poem on Father and Son by Cat Stevens. That was probably the hardest emotionally that I've worked at a poem. And I'm really happy with how it came out.
Awesome. Um, what is the best way to keep up with you if somebody wants to know what you're doing?
Hmm.
If you even want
I've
people to know
used
what you're doing.
they, you know. I'm on the internet now, so it's like I gotta be comfortable with that. I have a YouTube channel called Beyond Ourselves. You can just search Beyond Ourselves, or if you search my name, Michael Deklerk, you'll find it on there. I'm that channel started as a podcast interview channel, and then it kind of evolved into where I share my poetry, and now I'm kind of wanting to transition back to podcast interviews. So I have a couple lined up in the next month or so. So yeah, if people want to find me there, they can.
Good. What is a movie you tell everybody to watch? So we mentioned movies.
Hmm. Uh, movie called Lion.
Lion. All right.
Yeah,
There's probably more than one movie called Lion. Who starred in it,
yeah.
or what is it about?
It's Dev Patel and uh,
I'd be
uh,
able to find it and put it in the
Australian,
description
yeah,
after
Dev
the.
Patel, Australian woman. She's on like the AMC ads.
Uh huh.
I forget her name now.
It's
But
okay.
yeah, it's a brilliant, brilliant movie.
And a book that everyone should
Hmm.
read.
Hmm. Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman.
Life and Fate. Okay, and I also ask anybody: is there anything that you feel you didn't get to say that you felt should be said?
Hmm. I'll just say I'm grateful that you reached out, and I think this is
Yeah,
the
well,
first time
be
of
thankful
like,
to Aaron. He just was like, "Yeah, right off the rip, I'll do an interview with you," and that he just suggested
yeah,
you. So
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. Well, thanks be to Aaron. I've been meaning to reach back out and reconnect with him. It's been a little while. Just thank you for for inviting me on, and I think I definitely want to check more of your work out, and this was a real treat and a real joy, and I think you just the way you think about creativity and life and meaning and faith is is really beautiful and quite unique, I think.
thank you,
So keep going, keep charging ahead.
and you keep charging ahead too, because you're gonna help a lot of people much more directly than I will. My stuff's, a writer's helps people in the back end, but you're helping up front, I think. And the
I
last two
think
questions.
yeah.
Sorry, what?
No, I was just gonna say I think the world needs both. I think the world needs
I agree.
front and back end. Yeah, yeah.
And the last and two most important questions of all time. What is your favorite color?
Ooh, blue.
Blue. Mine as well. Specifically the same blue color as my eyes. I'm a little bit vain in that way. And then, do your shoes make you run fast?
Oh man. No.
No.
I don't think anything could make me run fast.
I'm just saying,
Um,
6-year-old me would be really disappointed in your shoe choice. Okay,
I need to get the ones with the springs.
the ones with the springs.
That
Yeah, you need the light
that
up
all the
ones. The
kids were
lights
like,
always help.
yeah, exactly. The light up ones and the ones with the wheels on it. That I
Oh, the
messed up. I never
wheelies.
got a wheelie. Never got a wheelie pair of shoes.
Yeah, I don't actually remember if they were called wheelies. I always called them wheelies though.
They
So
are.
awesome. Thank you so much. I always save those two questions for last because I figure if kids ask them, they're the most important questions. So next time
Hard
I'll ask you what
hitters.
your favorite dinosaur is, because that's the other question they always ask.
Yeah. What my favorite cereal is. Yeah.
All right, thank you very
All
much.
right.